Souls Day. And technically, All Saints Day is November 1st, All Souls Day, November 2nd. It's sort of a technical distinction, I think, but it's always good to explain the difference. All Saints Day is the day when we celebrate kind of the famous saints, right? The ones that have been acclaimed either by church or by society as role models and exemplars, and we tend to know them. I would say if we were making saints this year, maybe Ruth Bader Ginsburg and John Lewis might be examples of modern saints, right? And there are many people that some are considered saints in one church, but not considered saints in another. We're not going to get involved in all that. I think we could all agree on this. There are people who, by their manner of life, inspire us to be our best selves. And we hold them up as people who are role models for us, that if they can do it, we can do it too. And I think in a faith like Christianity, it's important to have saints or to venerate saints, because we sometimes, especially as Protestants, tend to think that Jesus alone is our best exemplar, our best role model. And yet we also believe that Jesus was partly divine, partly human. It kind of takes us off the hook a little bit. We don't have to aspire quite to that. The bar is high, let's just say, with Jesus. With the famous saints, the bar is attainable, right? If they did it, we can do it. And it shouldn't be a political process. It should be a process where we all recognize people that I think inspire us to larger living and to greater loving. And that's who we remember today, the famous saints. And then the church also recognizes that everybody is a saint. What was it we used to say? Every saint has a past, every sinner has a future. Every single person is a saint in the eyes of God. Saint just means holy. And in the early Christian church, and you see this in the epistles, they would say, greet the saints with a holy kiss, greet one another. And Paul would call them saints when he wrote to them in their letter. It just means holy person, and everyone is holy because we are all made in the image and likeness of God. And on All Souls Day, we remember the people who are dear to us or known to us, but maybe not to anyone else. But we know the impact we had on their life, that they had on our lives. And we remember them. We remember our dead, because as Christians, we also have this in our creed. I look for the resurrection of the dead and the life everlasting, or the life of the world to come, depending upon what version you may have memorized as a child or for confirmation. But we do believe that death does not have the final word. And in very conventional terms, we believe in heaven. That's an imprecise, imperfect word for paradise, or for the place where we'll all be reunited again. It reminds us that there is more to this life than what we just see. All Saints Day, All Souls Day, these are the days when we particularly remember those who have gone before us, those we love but no longer see. These are our saints, our souls, and they're all precious. And I believe that everyone goes to heaven. That's what makes it heaven. We don't believe in hell, and I don't think you'll find much in the words of Jesus. In fact, Jesus doesn't talk that much about the afterlife. So though I almost always have a gospel in the church service today, I veered off a little bit and just used the epistle and the Revelation of John, and some contemporary poems as well. Because I loved in the poems, the poem and the monologue from Angels in America, that they recognize the reality of human emotion and grief. I loved the anger that comes through Joan Crawford's reading of Edna St. Vincent Millay's poem. I know, but I am not resigned. And on this day, it's important to say this. You can be angry, you can be sad, you can be numb. Death and grief affects us in different ways. But one thing we do as a faith community is at least once a year, probably we should do it more often, we talk about the reality of life and death, of mortality, and it gives us a chance to be consoled by our belief that, at least in our faith, there is more to come. Now, in Judaism, Jesus's Judaism, uh, uh, there was not a strong belief in the afterlife. It was never talked about. Mostly you were talked about as living eternally in God's heart and in God's memory, or in our memories. And that belief about the afterlife is still true in Judaism today. It doesn't really believe in the afterlife. I'm not dissing that faith, but I'm saying that as a Christian, for me, I find meaning and comfort in the sure and certain knowledge that I will see again the people that I love but no longer see. Now, on a topic like this, it's important to acknowledge we are an interfaith and interreligious community, and that includes people who may be self-identified as atheists, agnostic. Everybody's welcome. It's a big tent, and you may not share my own belief about resurrection and about heaven, but today I would like the opportunity more to testify about what I believe happens when we die and the importance of believing, if you are comfortable believing so. And I'm going to give you an example of, I really mean this. In one of the churches I served in the last few years, there was the head of the deacons was a prominent physician, an anesthesiologist, a hospital, rather famous hospital. And he came to me the week before Easter and said, I hope you're not going to get up there and preach about the resuscitation of a corpse. And he was letting me know in no uncertain terms that, you know, there were limits to his belief. He says, I'm a cultural Christian, but, you know, I don't want to hear about that. That's just foolishness. And I told him that I do believe in the afterlife, and I do believe in the resurrection of the body, and I believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And I have found great comfort in it. But I say this to say, but I said to him, just because I believe it, you don't have to believe it. And when I was a preacher in the South, it was especially important for me to say, just because the preacher says it doesn't mean you have to believe it. Now in the South, you know, that's kind of it's a shock for them to hear the preacher say, you don't have to believe it just because I believe it. But I want to be sure to say it. What makes our congregation strong, in a sense, is not uniformity of belief, but commitment to each other. And so I just wanted to take particular care when in talking about heaven and the afterlife to say that it's okay for there to be diversity of belief. But on this day, when we remember our dead, I do want to offer this testimony, based in fact on what I've read in the scriptures, also based in what I've experienced personally. I have been present at the death of many people. And that's one of the privileges of being a minister, that you get to be present to people and to bring comfort to them under normal circumstances at the time of their passing. It's a great privilege. And I have to tell you, I've been there 500 times probably. And each and every time, it's a sacred moment. It never is not that. Something happens. It's not end, it's transformation. And I believe it, and I've felt it, and I've seen it, and I've seen it my whole life long. You know, when I was younger, I scoffed at belief in heaven, especially when I was in my 20s. And then I experienced firsthand the death of many people my age, and it changed me because I couldn't accept what I could not accept, was that this was end, that this was it. I believed, felt, saw, and still believe in this is a moment of transformation. And because I believe that, it frees me up in my daily life. There are plenty of things I'm afraid of, you know, spiders, COVID, to be honest. But I am not afraid of dying per se. I don't want to do it by myself, but I do believe that there is something next, something fabulous, something glorious, something healing, a great restoration. I want to say this also because I think we're in a little bit of collective national denial around the reality of COVID. You know, we have a national leader and leaders who are minimizing it. And I saw the son of our president say this week, oh, it's over. It's just over. COVID's over. And perhaps you saw this kind of flippant speech as well. It's not over. And we have to be prepared for it. And we have to talk about it. And we have to engage it as a public health threat and also as a matter of faith. You know, over 230,000 people have died in the United States. That's 1/5 of the COVID deaths worldwide, and we have less than 1/5 of the population, let's just say. And 800 people will likely die today from COVID. I don't say this to be morbid or depressing. This is happening. And so if death is happening, I also want to be sure that we have access to all of our spiritual resources too. And part of what I believe our spiritual resources includes is that there is more to come, that we return to God from whom we came, and that we will all be together there. All of us. Oh, blessed communion, fellowship divine, we feebly struggle, they in glory shine, as we sang in the hymn for all the saints. I love that verse. Today I do want to talk about death and life eternal. You know, as I said, I've been present many times at the time of people's passing, and I share a few of these stories not to make light, but to share that they're sometimes painful, sometimes sad, but when it's possible, you can be part of this transition, this transformation. My friend Matt Schenkel, who knew that I loved coffee from Spinelli's. It was a roastery in San Francisco at one time, and we would meet there often for coffee before he became ill. As he was dying, opened his eyes and said to me, "I can smell heaven, and it smells like coffee, and they serve Spinelli's." I mean, he hadn't spoken in 2 days, right? But he said this to me because people are conscious and aware of what's going around, even when it doesn't look like it. And I want to say this to you: if you have the opportunity to be with someone who's passing, even if they're not conscious, pray for them and speak to them, because there is death is a moment that we call, but also there's a lead up and a lead down. I believe that, and I urge you to express your feelings and to offer words of comfort. My friend Paul Fairley is my friend. He was my student. Died of brain cancer. We survived AIDS, and then he died of brain cancer in his mid-30s. It was hard, let's just say. And he lived in Toronto, and I was able to see with him, go and be with him because of people's generosity 3 times before he died, and then come back for his funeral. And in Canada, they have universal health care. It's different from ours, but they have palliative care. So in the hospital, there's a hospice, and they don't offer extraordinary means to people. That was a new experience for me. But it meant that Paul was fairly conscious until nearly his death. And just, I don't know how many hours it was, if not very many, maybe a day before he died, he opened his eyes, saw me there, and he did this. And that's because my friends know this about me. I'm a terrible driver. And he was making fun of me and my driving less than 24 hours before he passed. Okay. It just shows that some things, wickedness is maybe one of the last senses to go. But it was a moment of beauty and grace. I can't even explain it. We hadn't even been able to have a conversation in days. But just the fact that he made fun of my driving like that with just a few simple gestures, it reminded me that this is a process. And I'll tell you, I really do believe that people's spirits endure. How many times do we feel their presence? If you're open to it, I look for the resurrection. That's how the first line of that sentence in the creed goes. And that means I'm open to seeing new life, new beginnings, and the presence of those I love but no longer see around me. And I can be comforted by them. Not always, not on demand, but sometimes when I need it most, I know I can. So in these scriptures, I pulled out my old preaching Bible with all the post-it notes and all those stories, and some of your stories are in this Bible too. But I remembered one of my favorite passages. We have this treasure in earthen vessels. This is from Paul's letter to 2 Corinthians. In 2 Corinthians, we have this treasure in earthen vessels to show the transcendent power belongs to God and not to us. Now, Paul and his friends are talking about how they are maybe imperfect in their lives, but they still are able to do something beautiful and glorious in their service to God. This treasure, this glorious thing, this eternal thing, this valuable thing in an earthen vessel, an imperfect container, right? So, but it's also a reference to what's eternal in our spirits, in our human body, which is fleshly, which doesn't last. It doesn't last forever. I wish it did. It doesn't. We have this treasure in earthen vessels, our souls, to show that the transcendent power belongs to God and not to us. Everything we are and all of who we are belongs to God. And when we die, we return to that. And it does not mean that the earthen vessel, our bodies, are not important. They are important. They're sacred. They hold what's eternal in us, right? And then he goes on to say, we are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed, always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be manifest in our bodies. And what that means is through baptism, we are attached to Christ. And we know that he died, and we know that he lived. And so that death is in us, but that resurrection power is in us too. And that's what happens in that moment of transition. While we live, we're always being given up to death, but we don't lose heart. Our outer nature is wasting away. Our inner nature is being renewed every day. I have felt this many times with people as they pass. Their body no longer suits them. It can't contain their glory. And I'm not trying to be cliche here. I really believe this. I've seen it happen. I've seen their light grow brighter even as their body fades. And you can feel it when it happens. You can feel it. You know it. This is not end. This is change. And change is not death. Change is just change. And there's more to come. We don't lose heart. We know that if the earthly tent we live in is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. You know, our bodies may fail, and we are not our bodies. Now, I say that cautiously in a Christian group because sometimes we don't love our bodies enough, even though we believe that the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, full of grace and truth in Jesus Christ. We know that bodies are good. God chose the body as the site of human revelation to make the greatest statement God could make about love. But also, it's not forever. What's forever is the part of us that is with God and returns to that place that's not geographical, it's not spatial, but it's a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. Here indeed we groan, Paul says, and long to put on our heavenly dwelling. I think that sometimes in moments of great joy or moments of great lament, when our collective voice raises, that's our sighing, that's our groaning for something greater. You know, the one church that I served, the one in the Castro, where so many young people died, we had this service on Sunday nights where people sang. It was sometimes, I swear to God, it would go on for 2 hours, 2.5 hours. We would stand in the back after church, the other minister and I, and people would just keep singing. They didn't want to stop because there was so much grief that was going on. And there was this one song we sang every week that I thought of our collective wail. We wailed once a week. It helped. It helps to wail sometimes. It's by Jennifer Holliday. It's not a church song. Oh God, we need your love. Oh God, we need your peace. Oh God, we need your joy so we can be free. And it had an impossible range. Anna, it had a high E, and every week people hit it. Oh God, we need your love. Oh God, we need your joy. Oh God, we need your peace so we can be free. so I'm lowering it right now for my advanced age tenor key. But we sang it and it sounded like wailing, and it was beautiful because so much emotion was coming out. And I believe some of it was sadness, but some of it was anticipation. We will be together. The saints are vindicated by how we live today. You know, the memory of those who have gone before us, we can actually impact. You know, there's a terrible loss with Ruth Bader Ginsburg or John Lewis or others that we might name, right? What can we do? We can't prevent them from dying, but we can live our lives in such a way that their suffering is vindicated because we are working to change the circumstances that were passionate to them and dear to them. You know, this week, I don't know if you've been paying attention to the whole discourse around people getting to vote for the first time, young people voting for the first time, people of color in the South in particular, who are really working hard to overcome voter suppression. They, to a person, often will cite, my mother and father couldn't vote. My grandparents couldn't vote. I am voting for them as well as for me. This is how we vindicate the suffering of the saints who've gone before us. The passage from Revelation, I want to cite too, because it talks about an image of, so the people in Revelation were Christians who were being persecuted by the Roman government. And there's a lot of trippy stuff in Revelation, but there's a lot of beautiful stuff. If we can imagine it, we can make it real. And these were people who were suffering and they wanted a life free from persecution. And so they say, and then I looked and there was a great multitude. So it starts out just before that with being described all of the first number of people that he sees in heaven. 144,000, there's a number. And these are the Jews, Jesus' own people. And that number is a mystical number. But let me just say it this way, 12 tribes of Israel squared comes to 144,000. It was meant to say every single Jew who was alive was in heaven. But then he goes on to talk about the Gentiles. So Jews and Gentiles, that means everybody that you could think of. People who didn't like each other, different races, different nations. This is what he says. And he looked, and it was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, robed in white with palm branches in their hands. The image of heaven that is in the book of Revelation is everybody, literally everybody. What makes it holy? What makes it heaven? Everybody's welcome. Everyone can be there. And our best way to honor the saints who anticipate our reunion with them is for us to try to replicate those circumstances in our earthly lives, in our human institutions, in our relationships. You know, on Monday, I was in a meeting of the Peninsula Multi-Faith Coalition, the Anti-Racism Task Force. We are working earnestly and imperfectly to try to bring a higher level of anti-racism awareness and commitment among the faith communities of San Mateo. And we found even in our own group, we have racism. It was a very painful meeting, and yet there we all were, trying imperfectly, committed to bringing about the circumstance where all tribes, all nations are welcome. On Wednesday, I was in a meeting of the Transgender Task Force that's putting together the Transgender Day of Remembrance later this month in San Mateo County, and our church is a principal sponsor of it because we're open and affirming. Right now, we're the only other religious group. I'm sure there'll be a few others by then. But I was in a group conversation with 20 people, of which maybe 3 or 4 of us were cisgender or not transgender. And the tone of the meeting was a great, grave concern for what might happen with a particular outcome in the Tuesday election, that their rights, such as they are, will be lost and their protections will be repealed. And here's the worst thing, that nobody who isn't transgender will care. How do we honor the saints who have suffered in the past? We honor by saying, expressing solidarity to groups who feel vulnerable right now based on the outcome of the election. I'm not trying to make a partisan point here. Please listen more deeply for something. We say, we will commit ourselves to you and to your safety and to your equality. Even though it's not our social location, it doesn't matter. We take it on together because this is our view of what heaven's going to be like, and we're not willing to wait till we die to experience it. So here's what I want to offer up to us. On All Saints Day, let's remember our dead. Let's not be afraid to say their names, even if it makes us sad. Say their name and say it proud. Let's not be afraid to believe that there is more than we can see materially. This is the gift of Christianity. There's more than we can perceive materially. That's the best way I can summarize it. And I believe that's true about death and life. There is a great life to come that awaits us, where we will all be together. I bet that we're going to be surprised to see some of the people that we'll see there, and there'll be people who'll be surprised to see us. But we have an opportunity to practice for eternity here on earth. So let's make that our All Saints Day prayer. We honor our saints, we honor all souls, and we honor the living, because someday we will all be together again. Amen.